أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين.
There's a Honda Civic. The plate starts with CMX. Whoever it belongs to, the alarm is going off.
What color?
Honda Civic.
What color?
Please send another louder salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية أبا عبد الله، سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وخليفة رب العالمين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد روي عن الإمام زين العابدين علي بن الحسين عليهم السلام أنه قال: وأجر للناس على يدي الخير ولا تمحقوا بالمن. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In these few nights that we have been together, we have been talking about and commenting on the dua of Makarim al-Akhlaq wa Ihsan al-A'mal of Imam Zain al-Abidin. This dua where the Imam explains for us and asks Allah for those most beautiful of virtues and as well those greatest and best of actions. And so far in our discussion, we have set the foundations for what those beautiful and perfect virtues are. And we have talked about how the basis and the foundation of those virtues is our relationship with Allah. And once we have established that foundation, then and only then can we hope to become among those perfect and complete creatures of Allah, those highest of Allah's creation, and reach that mission and that purpose upon which Allah has created us. Tonight, inshallah, I would like to reflect on these few lines of the Imam, the next few lines of the dua where the Imam says, وَأَجْرِ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى يَدِيَ الْخَيْرِ. O Allah, allow from my hands to flow upon people, an-nas, goodness. Allow goodness to flow from my hands and reach people, and do not erase them, and do not subtract that goodness that I do and I commit by a sense of sort of being and having a sense of other people having a responsibility to give me and pay me back this debt. Al-man. Sometimes we do good for someone, and then we have a sense that this person now owes me something, and they are indebted to me. The Imam says, allow goodness to flow from me towards other people, and do not void this goodness by this sense of self-pride and aggrandizement. Now, last night we talked about how Allah describes for us that each human being has a sense of dignity and a sense of honor. And we said that Allah, in fact, describes for us not just that human beings have dignity, but in fact we learn from the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt that every single creature that Allah has created has this honor and has to be respected. Every single creature. To illustrate this point, there is a hadith of the final prophet, Muhammad al-Mustafa where the prophet describes a man who was wandering in the desert. And he had lost his way, and he was parched and he was thirsty, and then all of a sudden he comes upon a well. And this man, he climbs down into the well, and he gets some water for himself, and he drinks this water and he quenches his thirst. As this man is climbing up from the well, he sees that there is this dog coming, walking in a state of heedlessness, in a state of total thirst, and he is about, this dog, as the Prophet is narrating, this dog is almost about to die. And this man, he sees this dog, and he has a sense of mercy and a compassion for this dog. And so he enters back into the well, and he takes his shoe, fills it with water, brings it back up, and he gives this dog something to drink. Allah, the Prophet of Allah says to his companions that Allah, when this man does this action, shows this compassion and this mercy to this dog, Allah forgives all of his sins, simply because of this small action, this small showing of kindness and mercy towards Allah's creature. The Prophet's companions asked the Prophet, "O Prophet of Allah, Ya Rasulullah, if we were to show that same amount of compassion, that same amount of sincerity towards Allah's creatures, would we also have the same fate? Would Allah also forgive us?" The Prophet responds, it is reported that the Prophet responds that whoever shows even the smallest amount of mercy towards Allah's creatures, he will receive the same fate. Allah will forgive all of his sins. The act seems small, but the reward seems entirely unequal to this minor act. What the Prophet of Allah is trying to show us, what he's trying to teach us, is that if we are seeing and looking and interacting with Allah's creatures through this compassion and this mercy that Allah has created within us, if we are able to have that sense of an open heart and this sense of sincerity in our actions, then Allah will forgive every single mistake that we have done. Now, why is that? When we reflect on stories like this, we can think about some of the other ahadith and teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and try to get some wisdom behind it. Try to understand the wisdom behind these sayings. In the end of the day, when Allah creates something, He has marked that thing and He has created that thing from Himself. When Allah creates something, He places a mark of Himself on that creature. And if we are able to see the signs of God within His creatures, and interact with those creatures in terms of their connection with God, then every single action, every single act of compassion that we have done it for God. Allah describes His creatures as ayat, as signs of Himself. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. We will show them, all human beings, our signs in the heavens and in themselves. So Allah has signs of Himself in the heavens and in the earth. To better understand this, maybe we can bring an example. And again, any material example that we give is always going to be insufficient when it is talking about Allah, the infinite and the boundless. When we love someone, when we look to someone that we love, whether it is our parents, our spouses, or our children, whatever thing that we see and we have from that person always reminds us of that person. We might have some memento from that person, a picture or something that they have created, something that they have drawn. For example, our children maybe sometimes will draw something for us. And it might not be the best drawing in the world. Right? Sometimes our young children, they might maybe draw ourselves and themselves. And it's just a stick figure. It's not the best drawing in the world. It's not the most profound. But because our child has drawn that drawing, because our child has dedicated that drawing to us, and there is an imprint and a mark of our child, of our beloved child, on that drawing itself becomes special. It becomes different. It is not like any other drawing or any other memento that we have in our lives. It transforms the things in our lives, this love. It transforms just normal objects in our lives. And so if we look at Allah's creation, not just in terms of us and a created thing. Sometimes when we look at, for example, a chair or a table, and we just see something, right? We just see another thing out there in the world. Or for example, we see an animal, or we see a human being, and we might interact with that person on a one-to-one relationship, on one-to-one level. But if we are able to bring Allah into that equation and see that creature, whatever it might be, as having an imprint of Allah, as being a sign of Allah, then that thing, if we truly love God, and if we're truly, that is the purpose of our creation, then that normal thing can become transformed for us and become a sign of our beloved, an ayah of Allah. Now, how are we ayatullah? Right? How are we signs of God? From the beginning of our creation, Allah is the source of our very creation. Allah created us, and He created all things within us, all virtues and all goodness within us. All of the beauties that we find within ourselves, they are sourced in Allah. And Allah has created the means by which we can reach Him. So our actions, our thoughts, and our deeds, all of which are going back to Him. And He is the goal for which we are created. So from the beginning of our creation, and the path that we take in our lives, and the ultimate end that we have in our lives, all of these things, not just us as human beings, but as any creature that Allah has created, these three things are created for Allah and by Allah. And so any creature that we interact with in the world has this imprint of God in these three ways. Allah is the source of our creation. He is the end and the goal of our creation, and He is the means by which we can reach that end. Now, we said last night that there is a certain honor and a certain dignity that mu'mineen have. What this means is that Allah creates His creation in different levels, with a hierarchy. The way we treat an animal, a creature of Allah, is different from the way that we treat human beings. And the way we treat different human beings should be different based on the values that Islam teaches us. Inshallah, in a future night, we'll have the opportunity to talk about what those values exactly are. What is it? What characteristics are prioritized in Islam? But before that, Allah gives a particular importance to human beings in general. Whenever Allah talks about goodness in the Quran, there's a very beautiful verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, which we will discuss after a loud salawat. It's Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 177, where Allah describes for us goodness. What is goodness? Allah says, لَيْسَ الْبِرُّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. Allah says, and this is an interesting set of verses. The context behind this verse is that there were Jews and Christians during the Prophet's time. And the Jews of the Prophet's time considered themselves to be that chosen community. And they said that, all of our actions and all of the customs that we have been taught by our prophets and by our forefathers, these are what make us special. And so they would turn towards one direction and they would pray in that direction. And then the Christians had their own beliefs and their own customs and their own rituals. And they said that we are the chosen people. We are those who are set aside from Allah's creation because of all of these things and our proximity to Allah. What Allah responds in this ayah is, He says, don't think that just because you do certain acts, just because you are part of a certain community, you have a certain identity, that makes you special. Don't think that goodness and truth is based on certain actions or certain communities that you're a part of. لَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ. Rather goodness is those who believe in Allah وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, and those who believe in the final day. And then Allah goes and lists for us a number of different beliefs and a number of different actions that define these people. Now, the wisdom that I want to extract from this ayah, and it behooves us to go and read this ayah and understand what is that list of things that Allah gives us and defines goodness in terms of. But what I want to point to in this ayah is that Allah defines goodness in terms of people. He defines goodness in terms of human beings. Human beings who have these virtues. Human beings who have these characteristics. When we read in Surah Al-Fatiha, what do we say? إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ. What does Allah say in this verse? He says, I want to describe for you what is that straight path. When you want to explain to someone something, a concept that is unfamiliar to them, usually you'll describe them in things that are familiar to them, or in things that are important. So if I want to describe for someone who does not know social media, I will describe it in terms of maybe, mail, postage, and so on and so forth, right? For somebody who's not familiar with what social media is, I'll say this is the quickest way that you can send somebody a letter, something like that. You describe it in terms of something which is familiar. Or you describe it in terms of something that is even more important. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. When Allah wants to describe for us the straight path, Allah describes it in terms of human beings. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. Those, oh Allah, give me and show me that path of those who you have given your blessings. Of those who you have given your ni'mah. And then when Allah wants to describe the path that we are not to take, He describes it also in terms of human beings. غَيْرِ الْمَقْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Not the path of those who you are angry with and those who are misguided. Allah describes it in terms of human beings. And of course, we know in our ahadith and in our tafasir that these are not just regular human beings. When Allah wants to describe something for us, He talks about it in the most important way. What is that pinnacle of human perfection? Who are those human beings who are true and complete human beings? What is interesting about the Quran is that it is not limited to a particular time or a particular place. When the Quran is trying to describe for us reality, it does not limit it for us in terms of those people who existed during the Prophet's time or who existed before the Prophet's time. The Quran at times, according to our ahadith, the Quran at times references people who will come later on. For those are the people who will perfect these attributes. And so when the Quran says, صَرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, we have a hadith which describe these الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, these human beings who have reached that level, that highest level of perfection, and those greatest of Allah's ni'mah, as the Ahlul Bayt, as Amirul Mu'mineen and his progeny. So let us not think that sometimes the tafasir will limit this to certain people during the Prophet's time or before the Prophet's time. Let's not think that the Quran is somehow limited in what its references. The Quran talks about the reality of the world. Allah, when He looks at this world, He's not limited to a particular time or a particular place. Allah looks at reality in terms of how it actually is. And so if there are creatures in Allah's creation which will come at a later time, then Allah will reference those people. صَرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, those human beings who have reached that highest level of human perfection. And so, when we are looking at the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, there is a particular importance that the Ahlul Bayt give to human beings, to people. We have traditions from the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa where the Prophet, it is described that the Prophet, whenever he would meet another person, he would face that person entirely. He would give that person his entire attention, his undivided attention. And only once that other person was done with his conversation with the Prophet, then the Prophet would turn away. It is said that whenever the Prophet would sit with someone, would sit in a group, that he would always engage those people in terms of the way they wanted to engage the Prophet. There is a hadith where one of the companions of the Prophet describes the interaction of the Prophet with other human beings, other people that were surrounding the Prophet. When the Prophet would speak to someone, he would always speak to them on their terms. The hadith is interesting. It says, if we wanted to talk about the akhirah, the Prophet would talk about the akhirah. If we wanted to talk about this dunya, the Prophet would talk about this dunya. It even says, if we wanted to talk about food, the Prophet would talk to us about food. He would interact with human beings on their own level. Now imagine this. The Prophet, which has so many responsibilities in the Muslim community. The Prophet, which has all of these wars and all of these engagements in his life. He gives each human being, each person that he interacts with, such care and such devotion. This is a person that we want to interact with. This is a person that we want to sit by. This is why the Prophet is considered al-uswatul hasana, that greatest model and that greatest example. The Prophet's khair and his goodness reached those around him. And he cared deeply and profoundly about those around him. There is a hadith of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam where he says, actually, excuse me, this is a hadith from Imam al-Baqir where he says, Man ahabba ibadillah, or inna min ahabbi ibadillah ila Allah laman habbaba ilayhi al-ma'ruf wa habbaba ilayhi fa'ala. The greatest, or one of the greatest of those that Allah loves, one of those greatest of Allah's servants that He loves are those who Allah has given in their hearts the love of doing good, of goodness, of ma'ruf. And what's interesting about ma'ruf is that it comes from a root which means to know. Right? Arafa. Right? To know. And what this means in the Quran, the way that it is used commonly, is that it is how people understand goodness. There are certain principles that we have that transcend time and place, but then there are certain contingencies that change the way we understand what is good in our time and what is not. Al-ma'ruf is what people understand to be good in your particular time, in your particular place. Again, this has a component of being transcendent and universal, but it also has a component of being relevant to a particular time and to a particular place and to a particular person. Al-ma'ruf is interacting with people based on that goodness. Based on the goodness that people understand. Sometimes I think that this is the medicine that everybody else needs. Right? I determine what it is that everyone else should have. But then nobody agrees with me. Right? Sometimes the medicine that's the prescription that we give to other people, it is unique only to us. Right? We think that everybody should do these things. But then, unfortunately, nobody agrees with us. We shouldn't be of those people who the Ahlul Bayt and the Ahadith talk about in terms of istibdad. Those people who think they know everything and think they can prescribe for others everything. Rather, we should be able to interact with other people, with other human beings on their own terms. And to understand goodness on their own terms. A lot of times, when we talk to someone, maybe they don't appreciate what we have to say. And so you have to talk to them at their level. And so Imam al-Baqir says, of the greatest and the most beloved of Allah's servants are those who Allah gives them this love of doing ma'ruf. And then beyond that, Allah gives them the love of acting upon that ma'ruf. Of acting upon that goodness. Now, the dua of Imam Zain al-Abidin does not stop there. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The dua of Imam Zain al-Abidin, he again uses opposites. He says, "Oh Allah, give me this virtue, and then refrain me and take me away from this vice." Right? Because once Allah gives us a particular virtue, sometimes that virtue can lead us to a vice itself. Right? In today's world, we are generally in developed countries, we are germ-free. Right? A lot of times we have soaps and different antibiotics that we use that make us germ-free. But because of this cleanliness, and as a result of this cleanliness, sometimes we actually have diseases and illnesses that come as a result. Right? Allergies are because, there are medical doctors here, I don't want to give any sort of medical knowledge, but they say that allergies are because, partly at least, are because we don't have that many germs that our bodies are fighting. And so, because of the cleanliness of our environment, sometimes that cleanliness can lead us to problems, can lead us to illnesses. Sometimes virtues that we see in ourselves can lead us to certain vices, to certain problems in our soul. And Imam Zain al-Abidin describes what these virtues and what these vices are. In this section of the dua, Imam Zain al-Abidin says, "Ya Allah, allow from me to flow this goodness, allow this goodness to flow from me, but O Allah, do not make this goodness lead to man, lead to me feeling and causing other people to feel as though they are in debt to me, and that they owe me something." In fact, Imam Zain al-Abidin here is referencing an ayah of the Quran where Allah says, "La tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal adha." Allah, in Surah Al-Baqarah, He describes two categories of people. He says, there are a group of people who do this. Whenever they do any sort of goodness to anybody else, they cause that other person to feel ashamed. And they cause that other person to feel that they owe you something. These group of people, Allah sets a parable. He says, they are like a stone. And it is a stone which has some amount of dirt on it. And what happens is that whenever a little amount of rain falls on this stone, that dirt gets washed off, and nothing grows from this stone. It's as hard as a rock. No goodness rises from this stone. And in opposition, in contrast to these people, are a people who give for the grace وَلِمَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ, and for the satisfaction of Allah. They don't care about any goodness that may be reciprocated towards them. These people, Allah sets the parable as a hill, as a valley where whenever rain comes down upon these people, whenever rain comes down upon this land, if it's some strong rain, then the produce and the result of that rain will be multiplied. The result of the vegetation becomes multiplied. And when there is no rain, when there is no blessing that comes from Allah, they produce dew, and there is some sort of blessing that they create within themselves. Right? When there is no external blessing that reaches to them, external resources that Allah gives to them, for them to spread those resources, they produce that goodness from themselves. Whatever goodness that they have already in their hearts. And so whatever state these people are in, whether they are in a state of wealth and affluence or in a state of poverty, these people produce goodness and virtue. And we have to be among that second category, where whatever goodness that we have, regardless of how small it is, even if we aren't able to produce any goodness. Right? There is a description of the Prophet where whenever the Prophet couldn't actually help someone, there were times when, of course, our resources are limited. When the Prophet couldn't help this person, he would not make them feel ashamed. The Prophet would stay silent. He would never say no to any human being. He would stay silent. If he was not able to find some way to help that person, then he would stay silent and he would not make them feel ashamed. So even if Allah does not give us the resources to help another human being, then at least we cannot make them feel that sense of shame for coming and asking us. There is a hadith, it's a very difficult hadith. And inshallah we'll end with this final hadith. And it is one from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Where the Imam says, جَزَى اللَّهُ الْمَعْرُوفَ إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ يُبْدَأُ عَنْ مَسْأَلَةٍ. Allah only rewards someone for a ma'ruf, for a goodness that he has done, when that goodness does not arise from any asking, from any questioning, from any pleading or begging. And then the Imam goes and describes for us someone who does not get any reward from Allah. He says, if there comes a time when someone asks you for something, there comes a time when someone has asked you for something and you have not responded to them. You have not given them what they want. And then they ask you again. And they ask you so much that they blush and they become red because they are embarrassed by asking you. They are embarrassed by asking you and they don't even know whether you will give to them what they ask for. And it is within your reach and your ability to give them what they are asking for. Then Imam as-Sadiq says, whatever thing you have in your possession, whatever resource Allah has given you, if you give that resource to them, that would not suffice you. That would not, neither would Allah reward you for that seeming compassion that you have shown to that person, but rather there may even be punishment because you have embarrassed that human being. Because you have broken their heart. You have put them in this state of uncertainty. Again, when we are interacting with people, we have to interact with them in terms of human beings, in terms of creatures of Allah. And we get that greatest example from the Ahlul Bayt. How did Imam Hussein, Aba Abdullah, treat the animals of his enemies? It is reported that when Hur and the army of his enemy stops Imam Hussein in Karbala, it is said that Imam Hussein treated the animals with respect. And he had his followers and his companions give water to the animals and to his enemies. In certain narrations, it is said that the Imam fed his enemies with his own hands. The Imam, throughout the days leading up to Ashura and on the day of Ashura, continued to call his enemies towards Allah. He would tell them, the doors of Allah's mercy are still open. You know who I am. If you ask for forgiveness, Allah will forgive you. We have the story of Hur. On that final day, Imam Hussein accepts Hur's tawbah. And how did his enemies respond? From his animals, to his companions, to his family, there was nothing but disrespect and injustice. If only it was just a level of disrespect. There was so much injustice done to Imam Hussein that Imam Hussein had to look to the most innocent of his companions, of his family, to show these enemies to what level of humanity that they had fallen. It is said that on those final moments, after all of his companions had been killed and slaughtered, all of his family members had been martyred, Imam Hussein looks around and he finds no one left. And he cries out, هل من ناصر ينصرنا هل من ضاب يضب عن حرم رسول الله. Is there anyone who can help us? Is there anyone who will come to our aid? Is there anyone who will protect and defend the haram of the Rasulullah? And no one responded. And so Imam Hussein, dejected and left alone, he turns to his tent and he turns to his camp and he looks to his sister Zainab and he says to Zainab, ناوليني ناوليني ولدي الصغير. Oh Zainab, bring me my young son, bring me my infant son, so that I may say my final farewell. Imam Hussein is trying to show them that you should respect the creation of Allah. And look how deep and how much you have fallen from Allah's humanity, from that highest rank that you must reach. And so Imam Hussein turns towards the enemy camp. And it is said that the enemy camp, the enemies were looking at the Imam, and it seemed that the Imam was covering something, he was hiding something. And so some thought that he had brought the Quran and he was going to beg them for mercy. And when finally the Imam takes away his cloak and he shows them an infant son, they say, Ya Hussein, what are you doing with this infant son? Some of them say, he is only asking for some water. The Imam says, if you do not show me any mercy, at least show this small child some mercy. Give him some water. Take him from my arms and give him water yourself. If you're not going to show us any compassion, then at least this small child, what harm and danger can come to you from an infant? And so the enemy camp, there is a commotion. Some say, give him water. Some say, take the child. Some say, fight him. Some say, don't give him any mercy. But as the commotion is happening, as these enemy soldiers are discussing, it is said that the decision was made. O Mu'mineen, think about what must be going through the mind and the heart of Imam Hussein. The decision was made and the arrow was put in the bow. And Harmala cast the arrow and it strikes the throat of this young child. And a young child's throat is very, very weak. It is said that the head of the child is separated from his body in the arms of his father. Imam Hussein doesn't know where to go. How could he show his mother? And so it is said that the Imam walked back and forth. He would take a few steps toward the camp, and then he would walk back. He would say his mother would like to see the child. But he would say, in what condition am I taking the child back? And so the Imam does not know what to do. He is in this state. And a decree comes from the skies and from the heavens. Ya Hussein, da'hu. Leave him. Bury him where he is. Oh Hussein, we will take care of him in the heavens. Oh Hussein, don't show his mother. Don't take him back to the camp. What will you say to Zainab? سيعلم الذين ظلموا أن منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.